Poor woman brings daughter to work, but nearly faints when she calls the billionaire boss Dad. The clock read 5:30 in the morning when Lauren woke up. The still dark sky outside the small apartment window brought no comfort. She sighed. Running her fingers through her tangled blonde hair, there was no choice. She would have to take Grace to work today. "Gracie, time to wake up," she called softly, touching the shoulder of her daughter who was curled up in the blankets. The 6-year-old girl opened her bright eyes, identical to her mother's, and frowned. "Is it time for school?" Lauren shook her head. "Remember, school is closed for repairs this week? You're coming to work with me today." The apartment was small, just 2 rooms besides the bathroom, but Lauren kept everything impeccably clean. After all, it was what she did best. While she prepared a quick coffee and sandwiches for lunch, she watched Grace put on her school uniform, even though she didn't have to. "Why are you putting that on, sweetie?" "Because I want to look serious at your work," Grace answered with that childlike logic that always melted Lauren's heart. They left as the city was still waking up. The subway was crowded as always, and Lauren held her daughter's hand tightly. She couldn't afford to lose her job at Winterfield Enterprises. The health benefits and the salary, though modest, were what kept them going. "Remember the rules?" Lauren asked as they changed lines. Grace nodded solemnly. "Be quiet. Don't touch anything. Don't get in the way. Do my homework." She proudly held up her pink backpack, where she carried a few books and colored pencils. "That's right. And the most important one. Don't go anywhere you can't see me," Grace completed. The Winterfield Enterprises building was imposing, 50 stories of glass and steel that shone against the morning sky. To Grace, it looked like a modern castle. Lauren used her ID badge to enter through the back, going straight to the locker room where she put on the gray uniform of the cleaning staff. "You look pretty, Mommy," Grace commented, sitting on the bench, swinging her legs that didn't reach the floor. Lauren smiled, adjusting her name tag. At 30, she still had the beauty she once dreamed of using for other purposes. But life had its own plans. "Your area today is the main hall and the corridors of the 49th floor," said her supervisor, a middle-aged woman with a perpetually tired expression. She stopped when she saw Grace. "Who's this?" "My daughter. Her school is closed for repairs, and I have no one to leave her with." The supervisor pursed her lips. "You know that's not allowed. Please, Carol. It's just for this week. I promise she won't be a bother." Carol looked at Grace, who smiled shyly. She sighed. "All right. But if anyone from management complains, I can't do anything." The main hall of Winterfield was immense, marble floors, glass walls, and a circular reception desk in the center. It was early, and only a few employees hurried past. Ignoring the blonde woman polishing the handrail of the main staircase, Grace sat on a nearby bench with her coloring book. From time to time, she would look up to watch her mother, who worked methodically, moving with quiet efficiency. "Mommy," Grace called softly as Lauren approached. "Sight, that man looks like a prince." Lauren followed her daughter's gaze. Her heart nearly stopped. It was James Winterfield, the owner of the company himself, known for his sternness and for rarely appearing on the lower floors. Tall, with perfectly styled dark brown hair and a suit that probably cost more than 6 months of her salary, he was walking through the lobby, talking to 2 executives. "Shh, honey, keep coloring." But Grace watched, fascinated. In her 6 years of life, spent in a modest neighborhood, she had never seen anyone like him. In the fairy tales her mother read at bedtime, princes wore capes and crowns. In real life, apparently, they wore suits and shiny watches. Lauren continued her work, trying to make herself invisible, as she always did when high-level executives were around. She lowered her head, focusing on the floor she was cleaning, hoping James Winterfield would pass by without noticing her. That's when it happened. A moment of distraction, Lauren turned to grab another cloth, and when she looked back, Grace was no longer on the bench. Her heart raced. Where could she have... "Daddy," Grace's clear, childish voice echoed through the hall. Lauren turned in horror to see her daughter running directly toward James Winterfield, arms open and a radiant smile on her face. For a moment, she almost fainted. Time seemed to freeze. The executives with Winterfield stopped talking. The receptionist looked up. The security guards tensed. And James Winterfield looked down at the little blonde girl, calling him Daddy, with an expression that mixed shock and utter confusion. Lauren dropped the bucket she was holding. Water and disinfectant spread across the immaculate floor as she ran toward her daughter. "Grace!" Her voice came out louder than she intended. "Get back here right now!" But it was too late. Grace had already reached James, hugging his leg naturally, as if she did it every day. Lauren arrived out of breath, gently pulling her daughter away from him. "I'm so sorry, sir. She didn't—" The words failed her. James's blue eyes fixed on her, then on the girl. They were cold, calculating eyes, the eyes of a man who had built an empire with relentless determination. "Your daughter?" he asked, his voice controlled, but with a note of curiosity Lauren hadn't expected. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Her school is closed for repairs and I had nowhere to leave her. I promise it won't happen again." The words came out in a desperate rush. "Please, don't fire me. I need this job." James looked at Grace again, who was now partially hiding behind her mother, but still watching him with curious eyes. "Why did she call me Daddy?" The question came out low, almost a whisper, as if meant only for Lauren to hear. Lauren felt her face burn. She's never known her father. "I think she saw you and—" She couldn't finish. How could she explain what she didn't even understand herself? One of the executives cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "James, we have that meeting in 5 minutes." James Winterfield raised a hand, signaling for silence, without taking his eyes off Lauren and Grace. "What's your name?" he asked the little girl. "Grace," she answered, warm, without shyness. "I like your watch. It shines like stars." A brief flicker of something, surprise, amusement, crossed James's eyes, so quickly that Lauren thought she had imagined it. "The girl can stay," he finally said, adjusting his suit jacket sleeve, "as long as she doesn't get in the way." Lauren blinked, stunned. "Thank you, sir." "She won't, I promise." James gave a short nod and continued on his way with the executives. But before the elevator doors closed, he glanced back one last time, his eyes meeting Grace's, who gave him a shy little wave. When the elevator doors closed, Lauren took a deep breath, feeling her legs tremble. She hugged Grace tightly, a mix of relief and worry washing over her. "Why did you do that, Gracie? Why did you call that man Daddy?" Grace shrugged, with the innocence only a child possesses. "He looks like a dad, like in the movies we watch. And you always say, 'My daddy was handsome and important.'" Lauren swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. She never expected her bedtime stories about an imaginary father, strong and kind, could lead to this. "Come on, I have to get back to work," she said, taking her daughter's hand and returning to the spilled bucket. As she cleaned the water from the floor, Lauren couldn't stop thinking about the look in James Winterfield's eyes. It wasn't just surprise or irritation. There was something else, something she couldn't identify. And for some reason that made her more nervous than the possibility of losing her job. On the 49th floor, behind closed doors, James Winterfield sat in his leather chair, vaguely listening to a presentation. His mind, however, was still in the lobby, with a little blonde girl with bright eyes who had called him Daddy, a word no one had ever used to refer to him. The meeting ended at 7 in the evening. The executives packed their briefcases, exchanged handshakes and left one by one, leaving James alone in the conference room. He remained seated, twirling a pen between his fingers, his gaze fixed on the city lights beginning to sparkle outside. "Do you need anything else, Mr. Winterfield?" his assistant asked, standing at the door. "No, Sarah. You can go home." The woman hesitated. "Are you sure? There are still a few contracts that—" "Tomorrow," James cut in. "Good night." When he was alone, James loosened his tie and stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. From that floor, the city looked like a carpet of pulsating lights, his empire, everything he had ever wanted, or at least that's what he thought until this morning. "Daddy!" The girl's voice echoed in his mind, so clear, so confident, as if there were no doubt at all that he was exactly who she called him. James shook his head, trying to push the memory away. He went back to his desk, picked up his leather briefcase, and left. In the empty elevator, his reflection stared back at him. A 38-year-old man, dark hair with a few grey strands at the temples, his face marked not by time, but by difficult decisions. The car was waiting for him in the garage. Thomas, his driver for 8 years, opened the back door with a discreet nod. "Home, sir?" James hesitated. "Yes, no, wait. Let's just drive around for a bit first." Thomas showed no surprise, although James had never made such a request before. "Anywhere in particular, sir? Just drive." "I want to see the city." The car glided through the illuminated streets. It was spring, and people were enjoying the mild evening at cafes, in parks, walking along the sidewalks. James watched it all with a new interest, as if seeing urban life for the first time. "We can stop here," he said suddenly as they passed a park. Thomas pulled the car over and James got out, asking the driver to wait. He walked through the park, hands in his pockets, feeling the cool night air. Families were still enjoying the end of the day, children running, parents chatting on benches, teenagers on their bikes. He sat on an empty bench and watched a man pushing his daughter on a swing. The girl looked to be about Grace's age, maybe a little older. She laughed with every push, asking to go higher, while her father smiled, granting her requests. "Higher, Daddy." That word again. Daddy. James closed his eyes for a moment. He was 38 years old and had never seriously considered being a father. His relationships were brief, convenient, without commitment. Beautiful women who expected nothing more than what he was willing to offer. Expensive dinners, exclusive gifts, nights at his apartment, and, inevitably, a polite end when his interest faded. He returned to the car, lost in thought. "Home now, sir." "Yes, Thomas." James's apartment occupied the top 2 floors of an exclusive building. A 4,000-square-foot penthouse with panoramic views, minimalist decor, and art selected by a professional curator. The perfect place for a successful man. A place that had never felt as empty as it did that night. James left his briefcase on the glass table in the living room, took off his jacket and poured himself a whiskey. He walked out to the balcony, feeling the cold wind on his face. Below, the city continued its nightly dance of lights and movement. His cell phone rang. It was Derek, one of his executives. "James, I'm with the guys at Meridian. We've got a table waiting. Coming for a drink." It was Thursday, happy hour night with the board, a weekly ritual he never missed. Guaranteed fun, expensive drinks, interesting women, business talk that evolved into increasingly indiscreet stories as the night wore on. "Not tonight, Derek. I'm busy." He hung up before the other man could insist. He went back inside, walking through the spacious living room, down the hallway decorated with black and white photographs, all landscapes, no human faces. He reached the master bedroom, where a king-size bed sat in the center, impeccably made. In the walk-in closet, dozens of suits were lined up, shirts organized by color, Italian shoes in perfect condition, everything in order, everything lifeless. James took a long shower, as if he could wash away the unusual thoughts that had been chasing him since morning. He put on a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt, clothes he rarely wore, and went to the kitchen to get something to eat. He opened the nearly empty refrigerator. Some fruit, mineral water, champagne. The chef he hired for special occasions had left a few pre-made meals in clear containers, each with precise heating instructions. James grabbed one without paying attention to the contents. While he waited for the microwave, he leaned against the marble counter. His gaze fell on the newspaper he had left there that morning. On the business page, a picture of him next to an article about the latest acquisition by Winterfield Enterprises. The serious face, the direct stare at the camera, the laudatory words highlighted. James Winterfield, the business genius who transformed a family company into a global conglomerate. James Winterfield, the business genius, the man who had everything, except someone to call him Dad. "Daddy!" Grace's voice echoed in his mind again. So spontaneous, so full of a confidence he had never experienced in his personal relationships. Such a simple word, Yet it carried so much weight. A call from one human being to another that transcended any contract, any negotiation, any corporate title. James turned off the microwave before it finished. He wasn't hungry. He went back to the living room, sat on the Italian leather sofa, and stared into space in silence. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, James Winterfield allowed himself to question his choices. The path he had taken to get where he was, what he had left behind. He had built an empire. He was respected, envied. He had enough money for 7 lifetimes, but that night, alone in his luxury apartment, he felt strangely empty. Will I ever have a family? He thought, surprising himself. Will I have someone to call me Dad? The question hung in the air, unanswered. James Winterfield, the man who always had answers for everything, who solved any problem with ruthless efficiency, couldn't answer a simple question about his own future, his own heart. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, and inside the silent apartment, a man faced the emptiness of a life built only for success, never for affection. The next morning, Lauren woke up earlier than usual. The restless night had left dark circles under her bright eyes. She couldn't stop thinking about the incident with James Winterfield. Even though he had allowed Grace to stay, the fear of losing her job hadn't left her. "Do we still have to go to work?" Grace asked, rubbing her eyes as she sat at the small kitchen table. Lauren smiled, trying to hide her worry. "Yes, sweetie. The school is still closed for repairs, remember?" "I liked your work," Grace said, biting into a piece of toast, especially the man with the shiny watch. Lauren nearly choked on her coffee. "Grace, did you hear what I said yesterday? We can't bother Mr. Winterfield. He's very important and busy. But he was nice to me." "He was kind, yes, but today you're going to sit quietly and do your activities. Deal?" Grace nodded, though her eyes twinkled in a way Lauren knew well, that look of someone planning something. They arrived early at Winterfield Enterprises. Lauren breathed a sigh of relief when she got her assignment for the day. The 32nd and 33rd floors, far from the main lobby and, more importantly, far from James's office. Maybe she could get through the day without running into him. "You're staying here today, in the corner of the break room," Lauren explained to her daughter, settling her into a chair at the back of the employee break room on the 32nd floor. "I have to clean all the offices on this floor, so you'll wait here, okay?" "Okay, Mommy." Lauren arranged the children's books and Grace's small pencil case on the table. "I'll be back soon to check on you. And remember, don't leave here, don't make noise, don't get in the way," Grace completed with a sigh. Lauren smiled, kissed her daughter's forehead, and left, pushing her cleaning cart. The 32nd floor was nearly empty at that hour, just a few employees arriving, making coffee, turning on computers. Lauren worked quickly, moving in and out of offices efficiently, always keeping an eye on the clock. Every half hour, she returned to the break room to check on Grace, who was quietly coloring in her activity book. On the third check, however, the girl seemed restless. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "I'm bored," Grace replied, pouting. "I've already finished all the pages in my book," Lauren sighed. She still had 5 more offices to clean on that floor. "Try drawing something on the back of the pages or read one of the stories. I promise we'll be done soon," Grace agreed, but her enthusiasm was gone. Lauren went back to work, worried. It was only the second day, and the week was still long. When she finished the 32nd floor, she took Grace to the 33rd. The routine repeated, the girl in the break room, Lauren working office by office. But this time, while cleaning a conference room, Lauren heard a buzz of conversation in the hallway. She peeked through the door and saw a group of executives getting out of the elevator. Her heart stopped when she recognized James Winterfield among them. "Was the meeting moved to this floor?" he was asking someone. "Yes, sir. The projection system in the 49th floor conference room is having issues." Lauren quickly stepped back into the room, praying they wouldn't notice her. She continued cleaning, her back to the door, when she heard footsteps approaching. "This room is occupied," said James's unmistakable voice. Lauren turned, holding the cleaning cloth like a shield. "I'm just finishing up, sir. 2 minutes and the space will be free." James watched her for a moment, and Lauren was sure he recognized her. "No rush. The meeting doesn't start for another half hour. He left, and Lauren breathed a sigh of relief. She finished cleaning as fast as she could and went back to the break room to check on Grace. The girl had just finished her sandwich. "Grace, we need to move. There's going to be an important meeting on this floor." "Where are we going to stay?" "In the service hallway. Just for a little while, until the meeting is over." Lauren set up a little spot for Grace in the narrow hallway that led to the emergency stairs. It wasn't ideal, but at least she would be out of the executive's sight. "Stay here and don't make any noise, okay? Mommy will be done with work soon." Grace nodded, but her eyes already showed her growing boredom. Lauren returned to her work with a heavy heart. It wasn't fair to subject a 6-year-old to this. 30 minutes later, when she went back to check on her daughter, she found the hallway empty. "Grace," she called, trying to control the panic in her voice. "Grace, where are you?" She went out into the main hallway, looking in every direction. Her heart was beating so hard it felt like it would escape through her throat. That's when she heard her daughter's unmistakable laugh coming from the conference room. Lauren ran over, stopping abruptly at the slightly open door. The room was occupied by James Winterfield and 6 other executives, all seated around the large oval table. And their aunt at the opposite end from James, sitting comfortably in a swivel chair far too big for her, was Grace, drawing in a new, colorful notebook. The girl seemed perfectly at ease, surrounded by men in suits who, surprisingly, seemed to accept her presence. One of them even leaned over to look at her drawing, smiling. Lauren froze, unsure what to do. That's when James looked up and saw her standing at the door. With a discreet gesture, he motioned for her to come in. "Your daughter found us just as we were about to start," he explained calmly, as if a child's presence in an executive meeting were the most natural thing in the world. I'm so sorry," Lauren stammered. "Grace, come on, we can't interrupt Mr. Winterfield's meeting." "But he gave me a new notebook," Grace protested, holding up the item. A hardcover notebook with gold spirals and thick, clearly expensive pages. Next to it was a box of professional colored pencils, the kind Lauren could never afford. "And he said I could stay here and draw." Lauren looked at James, confused. He maintained his neutral expression, but there was something different in his eyes. "It's all right," he said. "We're just discussing numbers and projections, nothing she can't hear." He paused, then added, "And nothing she'll understand, anyway." One of the older executives chuckled, breaking the tension. "She'll probably understand more than half of our shareholders." "Can I stay, Mommy, please?" Grace pleaded, with those eyes that were impossible to resist. Lauren hesitated. This wasn't a normal situation, but refusing might seem ungrateful. "Only if you stay quiet and don't get in the way, I promise," James nodded, as if the matter was settled, and turned his attention back to the documents on the table. "Shall we begin, gentlemen?" Lauren left, stunned, gently closing the door behind her. She continued her work in the other offices on the floor, but her mind was fixed on the scene she had just witnessed. Why had James Winterfield given her daughter expensive gifts? Why had he allowed her to stay in the meeting? 40 minutes later, the conference room door opened, and the executives began to leave, some casting curious glances at Grace, who remained in her seat, completely absorbed in her drawings. Lauren approached cautiously. "Time to go, Grace." "But I haven't finished my drawing," the girl protested. "The meeting is over, sweetie. We can't stay in the room." "Actually," James interrupted, still seated at his place at the head of the table, "I have a few more documents to review before my next meeting." "If it's no trouble, your daughter can continue drawing." Lauren stared at him, uncertain. "Won't it be a bother to you, sir?" James shook his head. "Not at all. She's quiet, and He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I appreciate the company." It was so strange to hear that from the man everyone described as cold and distant, that Lauren didn't know what to say. She agreed with a nod and left to continue her work. During every break she had, she would peek through the slightly open door. Grace continued to draw, occasionally showing something to James, who would examine it with genuine attention, making comments Lauren couldn't hear. One time when she looked, she witnessed something extraordinary. Grace had walked around the table and was standing next to James, showing him a drawing. He looked, said something, and then, to Lauren's utter surprise, he laughed. Her genuine laugh that completely transformed his austere face. Lauren stepped back, feeling as if she had witnessed a miracle. In 6 years of working at Winterfield, she had never seen James Winterfield laugh. At the end of the workday, when she went to get Grace, she found the girl putting away her new colored pencils with reverent care. "Look, Mommy. I drew our house and Mr. James said it was very pretty." Lauren looked at the drawing, a simple house with flowers in the yard, she and Grace holding hands, and a very blue sky above them. It was a typical child's drawing, but done with the care of someone trying to impress. "Mom, it is beautiful, sweetie," Lauren agreed, avoiding looking at James, who was putting documents into his leather briefcase. "And I drew him too," Grace announced, showing another paper. Lauren took the drawing carefully. In it, Grace had depicted James in his dark suit and with a gold watch on his wrist, much larger than the real one, and a wide smile on his face. Next to him, Grace had drawn herself holding his hand. Below, in her childish handwriting, she had written, "My friend James." Lauren's heart tightened. What was happening? Why was one of the most powerful and unapproachable men in the city showing such kindness to her daughter? "She has talent," James commented, approaching. Lauren looked up, trying to read his expression. "Thank you, sir, and thank you for the notebook and pencils. You didn't have to." "It was my pleasure," he interrupted. Then, with an almost shy glance at Grace, he added, "It's been a long time since I met someone as honest in their opinions as your daughter." Grace beamed with pride. "I told Mr. James he should smile more because he looks handsome when he smiles." Lauren felt her face burn. "Grace." But James just smiled, that rare smile again. "And she's right. I get a lot of advice from my executives, but none as valuable as that." A strange, almost comfortable silence settled between them. Lauren was the first to break it. "We need to go. Thank you again, Mr. Winterfield." "James," he said, surprising himself as much as Lauren. "You can call me James." Lauren blinked, confused. "Yes, sir. I mean, James." As they were leaving, Grace turned and waved. "See you tomorrow, Mr. James." "See you tomorrow, Grace," he replied, with a formality that seemed strangely fitting for a conversation with a 6-year-old. On the subway home, Grace talked non-stop about her day, about her drawings, about how Mr. James had said she drew better than many adults. Lauren listened in silence, still trying to process what had happened. It was as if her daughter had inadvertently broken down a wall that kept James Winterfield distant from everyone around him. "Mommy," Grace called as they arrived at the apartment. "Why does Mr. James look sad even when he's not sad?" Lauren looked at her daughter, surprised by the insightful question. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "His eyes. Sometimes he smiles, but his eyes are still sad. Like Max in my class when he says he's okay, but he really misses his grandma who died." Lauren sat down, pulling Grace onto her lap. She was always surprised by her daughter's ability to see beyond appearances. "I don't know, Gracie. Maybe Mr. James is sad on the inside." "Why?" "Sometimes people are sad even when they have everything," Lauren answered, thinking out loud. "Maybe he's lonely." "How can he be? He has lots of people working for him." "Yes, but that's not the same as having friends or family." Grace became thoughtful, and then her eyes lit up. "I can be his friend." Lauren opened her mouth to explain why that wasn't possible, why there was an impassable chasm between people like them and people like James Winterfield. But something stopped her, the image of his face transformed by laughter as he looked at Grace's drawing. "Maybe you already are," she said simply, hugging her daughter tighter. That same night, miles away in his luxurious apartment, James Winterfield sat in his private office. On the polished mahogany desk, among financial reports and contracts, was the drawing Grace had made of him, a copy he had asked to be made, which the girl had proudly given him. He looked at that simplified figure of himself, a man in a suit with a smile that was too big and a disproportionately large gold watch. Beside him, the little blonde girl with bright eyes, holding his hand. James touched the paper with his fingertips, feeling an emotion he couldn't name. All day, from the moment he had seen Grace sitting alone in the hallway with her coloring book already completely filled, he had felt compelled to do something. The simple gesture of buying a notebook and colored pencils from the ground floor stationery store had triggered something unexpected. The genuine joy on the girl's face when she received the gifts, her concentration as she drew, her honest and direct comments, it had all affected him in a way he hadn't expected. For the first time in years, James Winterfield had felt pleasure in something that wasn't related to business or achievements. Just the simple satisfaction of seeing a child happy because of a gesture he had made. He carefully put the drawing in a drawer. He didn't know what was happening to him, but he knew he wanted to find out. The week progressed, and Grace's presence in the halls of Winterfield Enterprises became almost normal. Employees now greeted her with smiles. Some even brought her candy or small gifts. The little blonde girl with sparkling eyes had carved out an unlikely space for herself in that corporate environment. On Thursday, James had an important meeting with foreign investors. He wore his best suit, an impeccable Italian tie, and carried a briefcase with charts and projections carefully prepared by his team. The meeting lasted 3 hours, tense negotiations, tough questions, moments of strategic silence. When it finally ended, with firm handshakes and promises of future contacts, James felt mentally exhausted. He left the conference room, discreetly loosening the knot of his tie. He needed a moment of peace before the next meeting. That's when he saw Grace sitting alone on a bench in the hallway, swinging her legs that didn't reach the floor. The girl had the notebook he had given her open on her lap, but she wasn't drawing. She was staring out the window with a bored expression that James recognized, the same one he saw on his own face during endless board meetings. "Where's your mother?" he asked, approaching her. Grace turned, her face lighting up when she recognized him. "She's cleaning the big bathroom. She said it would take a while and asked me to wait here." James checked his watch. He had 40 minutes until his next meeting. An unexpected idea came to his mind. "Have you had lunch yet?" Grace shook her head. "Mommy said we're going to eat in a little bit." "I have a better idea," James said, surprising himself. "How about a special snack?" Grace's eyes lit up. "What kind of snack?" "A secret snack," he replied, lowering his voice as if sharing confidential information. "In my office. Can I bring my notebook?" "Of course." James held out his hand, which Grace took without hesitation. James had never brought a child to his private office before. In fact, he rarely brought anyone besides his closest executives. The place was his sanctuary, where he made the company's most important decisions. "Wow!" Grace exclaimed as she entered. "It's bigger than our whole house." James looked around, seeing his office through her eyes. It was indeed large, with an imposing dark wood desk, leather sofas, an entire wall of glass overlooking the city, and another covered in awards and certificates. "Sit over there," he said, pointing to the sofa. "I'll arrange our snack." He picked up the phone and made a quick call. In less than 5 minutes, his assistant came in with a tray of juices, small sandwiches, cookies, and fruit. "Thank you, Sarah," James said. "Hold my calls for the next 20 minutes. The assistant cast a curious glance at Grace but simply nodded and left, closing the door softly. "Wow, it looks like a restaurant picnic," Grace commented, looking enchanted at the tray arranged on the coffee table. James smiled, pouring juice into 2 glasses. He had never shared his snack with anyone in that office. It was strange, yet somehow natural, to share this moment with the little visitor. "What color is this juice?" Grace asked, holding the glass up to her eyes and looking through the amber liquid. "It's apple juice," James replied. "Don't you like it?" "I do. But at my school, we only have orange or grape juice." She took a sip and smiled, leaving a juice mustache above her lip. "It's good." James picked up a napkin and handed it to her, which she used without ceremony. "Have you always worked here?" Grace asked, grabbing a cookie. "Not always, but for a long time. And you like it?" The simple question caught James by surprise. When was the last time someone had asked him if he liked what he did? "I do," he replied, realizing it was true. "I built all of this." "By yourself?" Grace looked impressed. That must have been hard. James almost laughed. I had help. But yes, it was hard. At school, the teacher says that hard things get easier when we do them with friends. Grace bit into another cookie. Do you have a lot of friends? The innocent question hit James like a punch. Friends. He had partners, colleagues, acquaintances, subordinates. But friends, I have a few, he lied, looking away. I have 3 best friends, Grace informed him, holding up 3 fingers, Lily, Sophie, and Anna. We do everything together, except now that the school is closed for repairs. She paused thoughtfully. But now I have you as a friend, so I'm not lonely. James felt a strange sensation in his chest, a warm feeling, uncomfortable yet pleasant at the same time. And you can see my new drawings, Grace continued, opening her notebook. I made one of our house, one of the park near school, and I started one of you, but I haven't finished it yet. James looked at the colorful drawings, listening intently as Grace explained every detail. The tree where she and her friends played during recess, the neighbor with a huge dog that looked like a bear, the teacher who wore glasses with a chain. It was a window into a world completely different from his own, a world of bright colors, simple friendships, and small joys, a world James barely remembered experiencing. And this one is my favorite, Grace said, showing a drawing where 3 figures holding hands were smiling under a bright yellow sun. Who are they? James asked, though he suspected the answer. Me, Mommy, and you, Grace replied matter-of-factly. We're friends now. James stared at the drawing, not knowing what to say. The simplicity with which Grace included him in her small circle left him speechless. They finished their snack in a gentle conversation, with Grace asking questions no one had ever dared to ask James Winterfield, whether he liked chocolate or vanilla ice cream more, if he knew how to ride a bike, if he had ever seen a rainbow up close. When the clock indicated it was time for James to head to his next meeting, he stood up almost reluctantly. I have to go now, Grace. I'll take you back to your mum. Thanks for the secret snack, she said, carefully putting her notebook away. It was the best snack of the week. On the way back, Grace held his hand naturally, talking about how she would draw his office when she got home. They found Lauren finishing up cleaning an office, a worried look on her face. Grace! Where were you? I was looking all over for you. I was having a secret snack with Mr. James, the girl answered cheerfully. He has apple juice in his office. Lauren looked at James, confused. I'm so sorry if she bothered you. Not at all, James interrupted. It was my pleasure. He returned to his meeting with a strange sense of lightness. For the first time in a long while, James Winterfield had a conversation that didn't involve numbers, strategies, or negotiations, just apple juice, cookies, and school stories, and, surprisingly, it had been the best part of his day. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Grace excitedly told her mother every detail of the secret snack, how huge James's office was, how the cookies were different from the ones they bought, how he had listened to all her stories without seeming bored. Lauren listened, stroking her daughter's blonde hair, torn between worry and a growing curiosity about the man who, for some inexplicable reason, was showing a completely unexpected side of himself. Friday morning brought a change to the routine at Winterfield Enterprises. Upon arriving at his office, James found a report with the cleaning staff's schedule on his desk. Normally, he wouldn't pay attention to such a document, but one name jumped out at him, Lauren Miller, assigned to the 49th floor, his floor. James smiled discreetly. He hadn't planned this, but he felt a strange satisfaction. For the past few days, Grace had occupied his thoughts in a surprising way. The girl's sincerity, her spontaneous joy, were like a breath of fresh air in his meticulously organized life. And now, without realizing it, he was starting to wonder about her mother, the woman raising this extraordinary child. As he reviewed contracts and took calls, his eyes often drifted to the door, catching glimpses of Lauren working in the hallway. For the first time, he truly watched her. Lauren moved with a quiet efficiency. There were no wasted movements, nothing theatrical. She worked with a dignity that James had never noticed before. When she came into his line of sight, she was always focused, serious, sometimes exchanging gentle words with Grace, who accompanied her with her sketchbook. During a particularly tedious video conference, James saw Lauren cleaning the windows of the adjacent meeting room. The morning sun streamed through the panes, illuminating her profile. He was surprised to notice she was beautiful, not in a flashy way, but with a serene beauty that the grey uniform couldn't hide. The same bright eyes as Grace, the same determined curve of her lips. "Mr. Winterfield, are you still with us?" The executive's voice on the screen brought James back to the meeting. "Yes, continue," he replied, forcing himself to focus on the numbers again. Later, as the morning neared its end, James went to get a coffee. In the hallway, he found Grace sitting on the floor drawing, while Lauren meticulously cleaned the wooden wall panels. "Good morning," he greeted, stopping beside them. "Good morning, Mr. James," Grace replied, looking up with a smile. "Do you want to see my new drawing?" "Absolutely," he said, crouching down to be at the girl's level. "It's the Winterfield building," Grace explained, showing a drawing of an imposing tower with rectangular windows. "And this is us." She pointed to 3 tiny figures at the entrance. "It's very good," James praised, and then noticed Lauren watching them. "Your daughter has talent." "Thank you," she replied with a restrained smile. She's always loved to draw. James noticed something in that moment, the way Lauren positioned herself, slightly hunched, as if trying to take up less space. The eyes, which in her daughter were confident and direct, in the mother always seemed ready to look away, to retreat. "Do you work tomorrow too?" Grace asked, interrupting his thoughts. "Sam, tomorrow is Saturday," James replied. "We don't either," Grace informed him. "We're going to the park, right, Mummy?" Lauren nodded. "If it doesn't rain." "Which park?" The question slipped from James's lips before he could stop it. "Riverside Park," Lauren answered, seeming surprised by his interest. "It's near our house." James knew the place, a small park near a lower middle-class neighborhood, nothing glamorous, but clean and well kept. He had never been inside, only driven past a few times. "Grace loves the swings," Lauren continued, her voice softening as she spoke of her daughter. "And there's a small pond with ducks." "The ducks eat out of my hand," Grace exclaimed, making a gesture with her little hands. James smiled. For a fleeting moment, he imagined himself in that park with them, far from financial reports, endless meetings, and impeccable suits. The image was so surreal he almost laughed. "I hope you have fun," he said simply, standing up. "So I have a meeting now. See you later, Grace." "See you later, Mr. James." As he walked away, James felt Lauren's gaze on his back. What did she think of him? She probably saw him like everyone else, the distant boss, the successful businessman, an authority figure to be feared. The thought bothered him, though he didn't quite understand why. During lunch, instead of eating with the executives in the building's restaurant as usual, James asked for a meal to be brought to his office. He wanted to be alone, or maybe, he admitted to himself, he wanted to observe more. From his window, he saw Lauren and Grace sitting on a bench in the small inner garden of the building. They were sharing what looked like a simple lunch. Even from a distance, he could see the tenderness in Lauren's gestures, the way she wiped the corner of her daughter's mouth with a napkin, how she smiled while listening to what the girl said, how they shared what appeared to be a single apple. James felt a pang in his chest. His own mother had died when he was a child, and his father, a practical and distant man, had never shown much affection. He had grown up in an environment of strict discipline where success was the only acceptable form of love. Watching Lauren with Grace, he saw something he had never experienced, that kind of everyday love, made of small gestures, constant attention, and real presence. In the afternoon, James left for an external meeting. When he returned, it was already past 5. The 49th floor was nearly empty. He went straight to his office, assuming Lauren and Grace had already left. He was surprised to hear voices coming from the small break room at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, and James stopped, not wanting to intrude, but unable to walk on. "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like other families?" Grace's voice was clear, innocent. There was a brief silence before Lauren answered, "Some families are different, sweetie. We have each other, and that's what's most important. But Lily has a daddy who takes her to ride her bike, And Sophie has one who tells funny stories. I wish I had a dad so much." James felt his heart clench at the sadness in the girl's voice. He should walk away, give them privacy, but his feet felt glued to the floor. "I know it's hard sometimes," Lauren said, her voice soft. "But we're strong together, aren't we?" "Yes," Grace replied, without much conviction. "But what if we had someone else, like Mr. James? He's nice to me." James held his breath. He felt like an intruder, but he couldn't move. "Mr. James is your friend, and that's very special," Lauren answered cautiously. "Yes, but he has his own life, a life very different from ours." "Why?" There was another silence, longer this time. "Grace, it's complicated. When you're older, you'll understand better. Is it because he's rich and we're poor?" The childlike frankness made James smile, despite the tension of the moment. He heard Lauren sigh. "Yes, that's one of the reasons. But there are many other things that separate people like us from people like him." "What kind of things?" "Experiences, opportunities, choices." Lauren's voice changed, becoming more distant, as if she were speaking not just to Grace, but to herself. "You know, Gracie, when I was a little more than twice your age, I met a man. He was handsome, charming, rich. He seemed like he was straight out of a fairy tale, and I was young and a dreamer." James leaned closer to hear better. He knew he should leave, but something kept him there. "He promised me the world. He said he loved me, that we would be together forever, and I believed him." Lauren paused. "Then I found out I was pregnant." "With you? And then?" Grace asked, absorbed in the story. "And then he disappeared. He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that it was a mistake, that it would interfere with his career. He offered me money so that you wouldn't be born." Lauren's voice trembled, and James felt a wave of anger. "Who was this man?" "But I said no. I said you were my baby and that we would be together no matter what. He then gave me a check and asked me never to look for him again. He said if I tried, he would deny you were his daughter. So he didn't want to be my daddy." Grace's small voice was filled with pain. "He didn't deserve to be your daddy, Gracie. A man who can't see the miracle that you are doesn't deserve to be a part of your life." James felt a lump in his throat. The strength of this woman, the dignity with which she spoke of such a deep betrayal, touched him in a way he hadn't expected. "Since then, it's just been the two of us," Lauren continued. "And you know what? I've never regretted it. Not for a second. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Even when it's hard sometimes." "Even when it's hard sometimes," Lauren confirmed. "Because when I look at you, I see everything that is good and beautiful in the world." James backed away silently, feeling ashamed for having listened to such an intimate conversation. He went back to his office, closed the door and sat down, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. Lauren's story had moved him deeply. How many women like her were there, abandoned, forced to fight alone, to sacrifice dreams and opportunities? And yet, Lauren showed no bitterness. She was raising her daughter with love, working with dignity, facing each day with a quiet strength that he, with all his resources, wasn't sure he possessed. He ran a hand over his face, trying to sort through his emotions. Lauren wasn't just the efficient cleaner, Grace's devoted mother. She was a woman who had faced abandonment and rejection, who had chosen the harder path for the love of her daughter. A few minutes later, he heard a soft knock on the door. "Come in," he called, quickly composing himself. Lauren appeared, hesitant. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Winterfield. I just wanted to let you know that we've finished cleaning this floor." James looked at her with new eyes, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple bun, the grey uniform that couldn't hide her natural elegance, her direct yet cautious gaze. "Thank you, Lauren," he said, deliberately using her first name. She seemed surprised. Grace asked to say goodbye. "She's just outside." "Of course," James replied, standing up. "And Lauren, I mean Miss Miller." "You can call me Lauren," she said with a small smile. "Lauren," he repeated, the name feeling strange on his lips. "I wanted to say that you have a wonderful daughter." Her face lit up. "Thank you. She really is. And that says a lot about you," James added, not knowing exactly why he felt the need to say it. "About the kind of mother you are." Lauren blushed slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "I do the best I can." "And it's enough," James said, with a conviction that surprised him. More than enough. For a moment, their eyes truly met, not the quick, evasive glance of an employee and boss, but a look of recognition between two people. James saw something in her eyes, a mix of confusion, gratitude, and something more, something he couldn't identify. The moment was broken when Grace appeared at the door, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. "Mr. James, I drew a picture of your car. Do you want to see?" "I'd love to," he replied, turning his attention to the girl. As Grace proudly showed him her drawing of the black Mercedes she had seen in the garage, James realized Lauren was watching them with a thoughtful expression. For the first time, he was seeing the woman behind the uniform. And what he saw intrigued and moved him at the same time. Lauren Miller wasn't just Grace's mother, the efficient employee. She was a woman of extraordinary strength who had faced abandonment with her head held high and built a dignified life for herself and her daughter. And for some inexplicable reason, James wanted to be a part of that life. The day was over. James drove his car through the illuminated city, the lights reflecting on the glass like artificial stars. He hadn't asked Thomas, his driver, to pick him up. He wanted to be alone, to feel the control of the vehicle, to have time to organize the thoughts that wouldn't leave him. He arrived at the building where he lived, a tower of glass and concrete that stood out in the urban landscape. The doorman greeted him with respect, opening the car door while another employee rushed to park it. "Good evening, Mr. Winterfield." "Good evening, Richard." The private elevator took him directly to the penthouse. When the doors opened, James entered his domain, the apartment that had cost more than many entire companies. He dropped his keys on the marble table in the hall, took off his jacket, and loosened his tie. Silence. It was always like this when he came back. No voice, no sound other than the quiet hum of the air conditioning. He went to the modern and impeccable kitchen, which he had never really used. He opened the fridge, took out a bottle of water, and poured himself a glass. On the counter, a briefcase with documents he had brought to review. More work, always more work. But that night, the idea of burying himself in financial reports seemed strangely meaningless. He walked out to the large balcony, from where he could see the entire city. Down below, thousands of lives were unfolding, families eating dinner together, children being put to bed, couples talking about their day. And there he was, at the top, isolated from it all. He went back inside and stopped in front of the minimalist bookshelf, where he kept the few photographs he owned. His father, serious and formal, in a graduation photo, himself receiving an Entrepreneur of the Year award. A photo of the Winterfield team in front of the new headquarters. No photos of friends, no family other than his deceased father, no pets. No sign that anyone really mattered to him, or that he mattered to anyone beyond the business world. James poured himself a whiskey and sat on the leather sofa, staring into the emptiness of the room. Normally, he would turn on the television to fill the silence, or review documents, or make calls to international contacts in different time zones. But that night, all he could think about was Lauren and Grace. The conversation he had overheard haunted him. The courage of that woman, abandoned while pregnant, choosing to raise her daughter alone, working any job available to provide a roof and food. And yet, she maintained her dignity, her kindness, raising a cheerful and vibrant child like Grace. Grace. James smiled at the thought of the girl, her colorful drawings, her direct questions, the way she looked at him without fear or adulation, just with genuine curiosity and that childlike trust he didn't deserve, but which touched him deeply nonetheless. He closed his eyes, remembering the shared snack, the school stories, the drawing where the three of them appeared holding hands under a bright yellow sun, a world so far from his own, yet somehow it felt more real than anything he had ever achieved. James stood up, restless. He walked through the apartment that had always seemed perfect to him, and now suddenly revealed itself as cold, impersonal. The expensive works of art on the walls, chosen by decorators, not for personal taste. The elegant furniture, but with no history or meaning. Nothing there spoke of who he was beyond his financial status. In the bedroom, he opened the nightstand drawer and took out the drawing Grace had given him. Himself in a suit, with a smile that was too big and a disproportionately large gold watch. The only object in the entire apartment that someone had made especially for him, with no ulterior motives, expecting nothing in return. He returned to the living room, holding the drawing. He sat down again, looking at the childish strokes. How could a piece of paper with colorful scribbles mean more than all the certificates and awards on his wall? James thought of Lauren, her bright eyes like her daughter's, the way she worked with quiet dignity, how she spoke to Grace with a patience and love he had never experienced in his own childhood. He thought of the story she had told, the pain she must have felt being abandoned, the courage she had to move on. And then, a realization hit him like a wave. In the last few days, since Grace had run into his life calling him Daddy, something had changed inside him. The meetings seemed less important, the numbers less urgent. It was as if a veil had been lifted, showing the superficiality of everything he had considered essential. The hours he had spent with Grace and Lauren, listening to simple school stories, sharing a snack, looking at colorful drawings, had been the most genuine he had lived in years, perhaps in his entire adult life. With them, I don't feel empty, he murmured to himself, surprised by the simple truth of those words. It's like the weight of the world gets lighter. Maybe this is what I've always been looking for. James stood up, with a clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. His entire adult life had been dedicated to building, conquering, accumulating. Success, power, professional respect. But for what? To come home every night to an empty apartment, with no one to share victories or defeats with. He looked out at the city through the window again. Somewhere down there, in a small apartment, Lauren was probably reading a story to Grace before bed. A modest home without luxuries, but full of something all his money couldn't buy. Real connection, genuine love, a purpose beyond work. For the first time in years, James Winterfield allowed himself to imagine a different life. A life where success and power were not the ultimate goal, but just tools for something greater. The possibility of being part of a family, of belonging to someone, of mattering beyond the title he held. He placed Grace's drawing on the table, decided tomorrow would be Saturday, the day Lauren and Grace were going to Riverside Park. Perhaps, James thought, as he finally got ready for bed, it was time for him to get to know that park too. Saturday dawned sunny, perfect for a trip to the park. Lauren was finishing up in the kitchen while Grace, already dressed in her favorite denim overalls, was putting crackers in a small bag to feed the ducks. "Mommy, can we bring more today? Last time the ducks wanted more." Lauren smiled, drying her hands on a dish towel. "All right, but remember not to give too much to the same duck. They all deserve some." The apartment's intercom buzzed, surprising them. Lauren frowned. They rarely had visitors, especially in the morning. "Ms. Miller?" The doorman's voice came through the receiver. "There's a gentleman down here asking for you, James Winterfield." Lauren froze, the towel still in her hands. "What?" "James Winterfield," and the doorman repeated, and Lauren could hear the surprise in his voice. He had probably never seen someone like James in that simple building. "Should I send him up?" "Is it Mr. James?" Grace exclaimed, jumping up and down next to her mother. "Did he come to visit us?" Lauren hesitated for only a second. "Yes, Carlos, please send him up." She hung up the intercom and looked around, suddenly aware of the apartment's simplicity, the worn-out sofa, the walls that needed a new coat of paint, the mismatched furniture. What could James Winterfield be doing here? The doorbell rang and Grace ran to the door. "I'll get it." "Grace, wait." Lauren caught up to her, nervously fixed her hair, and opened the door. James was standing there, not in his usual suit. He was wearing dark pants and a light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked younger, less intimidating. In one hand, he held a bouquet of colorful flowers. "Mr. James!" Grace hugged his legs before anyone could say a word. "Good morning, Grace," he replied, smiling at the girl. Then he looked up at Lauren. "I hope I'm not intruding." "No, Of course not, Lauren said, still surprised. Please, come in. James stepped inside, looking around with genuine interest, not the critical appraisal Lauren had feared. I brought these for you, he said, holding out the bouquet. I hope you like them. They're beautiful, Lauren replied, accepting the flowers, feeling strangely shy. Thank you. I'll put them in water. While Lauren looked for a vase in the small kitchen, Grace was already pulling James by the hand, showing him the apartment as if it were a palace. This is our sofa. It turns into a bed when we have guests. And this is where we watch TV, and over there is my bookshelf. And that's the picture I painted at school. James followed the girl, listening to every word, as if he were getting a tour of the gardens of Versailles. His eyes, normally calculating when examining million-dollar contracts, showed a genuine interest in Grace's little treasures. And this is my room, she announced, opening the door to a small room decorated with cloud and star wallpaper. Mommy painted the clouds by hand. It's really beautiful, James commented, admiring the handmade work on the walls. Lauren returned with the flowers in a makeshift vase, a glass juice pitcher they rarely used. Sorry about the vase, she said shyly. We don't have a real one. It's perfect, James replied, and his sincere tone surprised her. Grace told us you were going to the park today, he continued. I hope I'm not disrupting your plans. You're not, Lauren assured him. We were just about to leave. Actually, James seemed slightly nervous, something Lauren had never seen before. I wanted to invite you to dinner. Tonight, with me. Lauren blinked, caught off guard. Dinner? Yes, as a thank you for letting me get to know Grace. Dinner where? Grace asked excitedly. For in a castle, James laughed, a sound that was becoming more natural from him. Not exactly a castle, but I know a nice place with the best chocolate cake in the city for dessert. Chocolate cake? Grace's eyes sparkled. Can we go, Mommy? Please. Lauren hesitated. Go out to dinner with James Winterfield, her boss, the man who owned half the city. It seemed surreal. And potentially complicated. I don't know if that would be appropriate, she said quietly. Why not? James asked. It's just dinner between friends. There was sincerity in that word. It wasn't a trap or a game. And, to her own surprise, Lauren found that she wanted to accept. All right, she finally said. Thank you for the invitation. Yay, Grace celebrated, jumping around the small apartment. Great, James said, looking genuinely pleased. Can I pick you up at 7? 7 is perfect, Lauren agreed. James looked at Grace. And now, about that park. Would you mind if I joined you? I heard there are ducks that eat right out of your hand. Grace's face lit up. You want to see the ducks with us? If your mother doesn't mind, Lauren smiled, suddenly feeling light. Of course I don't mind. The trip to the park revealed a James Winterfield that Lauren had never imagined existed. At Riverside Park, he completely abandoned the persona of the ruthless businessman. He pushed Grace on the swing, running to catch her on the other side, making her laugh hysterically. He bought popsicles for the three of them when a street vendor passed by, and he chose grape without hesitation when Grace asked what his favorite flavor was. I actually haven't had a popsicle in years, he admitted to Lauren as Grace ran off toward the ducks. Not since college, maybe. Looks like you're making up for lost time, Lauren commented, watching him lick the popsicle that was already melting on his fingers. James looked at Grace, who was now carefully crouching to offer crackers to the ducks. Maybe I am, he replied, with a thoughtful expression. When they fed the ducks, James meticulously followed Grace's instructions on how to extend his hand without scaring them. Lauren watched, fascinated, as the powerful James Winterfield knelt on the grass, his hand outstretched with bits of cracker, marveling like a child when a brown duck finally accepted his offer. Fousey, Mommy, Grace exclaimed proudly. I taught Mr. James perfectly. You're a great teacher, Lauren agreed, exchanging a look with James that seemed to hold an entire unspoken conversation. When they parted ways, with the promise of dinner later, Lauren still felt like she was in a strange and pleasant dream. As if she had stepped into a story where social and hierarchical barriers didn't exist, where a man like James Winterfield could spend the morning feeding ducks with them. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Grace was already ready, wearing her best dress, light blue with small embroidered flowers. Lauren had opted for a simple, dark green dress that highlighted her eyes. It was the best thing she had in her wardrobe, saved for special occasions that rarely came up. "You look beautiful, Mommy," Grace said, as Lauren put her hair up in a simple bun. "You do too, sweetie," Lauren replied, trying to control the nervousness growing in her stomach. James took them to a restaurant Lauren would never have dared to enter on her own. It wasn't overtly luxurious, but it had an understated elegance that spoke of exclusivity. To her surprise, he had reserved a table in a quieter area, with comfortable chairs and a cozy atmosphere. "I chose this place because it has a really good kids' menu," James explained as the maitre d' led them to their table. "And then also because no one will bother us here." Grace looked at everything with wide eyes. The chandeliers, the pristine tablecloths, the waiters in formal attire. "It looks like a princess restaurant," she whispered to her mother. Lauren had expected to feel out of place, but James had a way of making her feel at ease. He suggested dishes, discreetly explained which silverware to use, but never in a way that made Lauren feel inadequate. The dinner went by with an ease Lauren hadn't expected. Grace, initially impressed by the setting, soon reverted to her usual chatty self, telling James about her school, her friends, and the book the teacher was reading to the class. "And in the next school play, I'm going to be a tree," she announced, while eating her spaghetti with exaggerated care to avoid staining her dress. "A tree?" James asked, leaning in with interest. "What kind of tree?" "A magic tree. I stand still, but when the princess needs to hide, I open my arms like this," Grace demonstrated, nearly knocking over her juice glass. "And she's protected." "That sounds like a very important tree for the story," James commented seriously. Lauren watched the interaction, feeling a strange sensation in her chest. James Winterfield, the businessman feared by executives on 3 continents, was completely absorbed in a conversation with a 6-year-old about her role as a magic tree. And the most surprising part, he seemed genuinely interested. "You know," Lauren commented while Grace was distracted by dessert, "I've never seen anyone but me listen to Grace with such attention." James looked at her, surprised. "How could you not? She's fascinating." He paused. "She reminds me that there's a world beyond spreadsheets and contracts. Her real world." As Grace enthusiastically dug into her chocolate cake, James turned to Lauren. "She's extraordinary," he said in a low voice. "She has your strength." Lauren felt her face grow warm. "Thank you. She's my everything." "I can tell." James paused. "You know, I've been watching you two, the bond you have. It's something rare." "We're just an ordinary family," Lauren replied, fidgeting with her napkin. "No," James disagreed gently. "There's nothing ordinary about you." When they arrived at the apartment, Grace was already yawning, her eyes heavy after the day's excitement. "Time for bed, little lady," Lauren said, opening the door. "But I want to show Mr. James my other drawings," Grace protested sleepily. "Maybe another day," James promised. "I'm not going anywhere." And surprisingly, he didn't. In the days that followed, James became a constant presence in their lives. At first, it was small visits. He would stop by to bring a book he thought Grace would like, or flowers for Lauren. Then, he started showing up with grocery bags. "I was just passing by the market," he would say, as if it were perfectly normal for the owner of Winterfield Enterprises to shop at a regular supermarket. "You don't have to bring things every time you come," Lauren protested once, as he placed fresh fruit in the fruit bowl. "I know I don't have to," he replied simply. "Yes, I want to." Soon, James was having dinner with them regularly. He would bring ingredients Lauren would never buy, fresh asparagus, special cheeses, cuts of meat that were out of her budget, and insist they cook together. For someone who probably never had to prepare his own food, he turned out to be surprisingly skilled in the kitchen. One night, when Lauren mentioned the kitchen faucet was dripping, he showed up the next day with a toolbox. He spent an hour trying to fix it, with Grace as his assistant, handing him the wrong tools and giving unlikely advice. I think we need a professional, he finally admitted, laughing at his own incompetence. At least you tried, Lauren consoled, pouring him a cup of coffee. That's more than most would do. James looked around the small kitchen, with its faded floral curtains and loudly humming refrigerator. I like it here, he said suddenly. It's a real home. One evening, after they had dinner together, Grace fell asleep on the sofa while they were watching an animated movie. Lauren carried her to bed, returning to find James looking at the photographs on the bookshelf. Baby Grace, a younger Lauren, some school trips. She's lucky to have you, he said when Lauren came back. I'm lucky to have her, Lauren corrected, sitting down on the sofa. She saved me as much as I saved her. James sat next to her, at a respectful distance. For a moment, they were silent. It wasn't uncomfortable, just calm, as if they didn't need to fill the air with words. You know, he began finally, looking at his own hands, I wasn't born rich. Lauren looked at him, surprised. James Winterfield was practically synonymous with privilege and power. People assume I was, he continued, that I was born with everything, that I've always had it all. But it's not true. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as if sharing a heavy burden. I grew up in a neighborhood worse than this one. My father worked in a factory. My mother died when I was 8. We grew up, my father and I, in a one-bedroom apartment. He slept on the couch. Lauren listened, fascinated by this glimpse of the man behind the facade. I had one pair of sneakers for the entire year. I wore the same pants until they were too small. I never had a birthday party. James smiled without humor. My father was a good man, but a tough one. There was no room for weakness in our life. How did you get to where you are? Lauren asked softly. I studied like my life depended on it. Because it did. I got scholarships, worked 3 jobs through college. I slept 4 hours a night for years. He paused. When I got my first job at Winterfield, I was just a junior analyst. The founder, old Mr. Winterfield, noticed my dedication. He became a sort of mentor. He had no children, and when he died, he left me shares in the company. James looked at her, his eyes revealing a vulnerability Lauren had never seen before. I grew up with nothing. Life forced me to be tough, to be cold. That's how I got here. But it also cost me something. I forgot how to genuinely smile. His eyes met Lauren's, and there was an almost painful vulnerability in them. Until I met Grace. And you. Lauren felt her eyes well up. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his hand. I never imagined. No one does, he replied, gently holding her hand. It's easier to just see the businessman, the boss, the rich guy. I see more than that now, Lauren said softly. At the door before he left, James turned to look at her one last time. Thank you, he said simply. For what? Lauren asked. For letting me in. And Lauren knew he wasn't just talking about the apartment. The rumors started as whispers, a look here, a comment there. Soon, Winterfield Enterprises was buzzing with speculation about the blonde cleaning lady and the powerful owner of the company. Lauren noticed it when she walked into the break room, and 3 employees abruptly stopped their conversation. Their looks said it all. Later, while cleaning the restrooms, she heard it clearly. A cleaning lady and the owner of the company. Please. She's obviously taking advantage of him, using her own daughter as bait. What kind of mother does that? Lauren dropped the bottle of disinfectant, alerting the women to her presence. They hurried out, embarrassed to have been overheard. That night, after putting Grace to bed, Lauren wrote a resignation letter. Tears stained the paper as she thought about what she would tell her daughter. How would she explain that they wouldn't see James anymore? But the rumors hurt too much, and eventually they could affect Grace. The next morning, she arrived early to give the letter to her supervisor. Passing by the conference room, she heard James's voice, unusually sharp. Unacceptable behavior. I will not tolerate this kind of toxic environment in my company. It's just office gossip, an executive replied. Just gossip. They are slandering a dedicated employee, a single mother who works harder than anyone in this room. Lauren stopped, realizing they were talking about her. "James," a woman intervened, "you have to admit the situation looks irregular." "Irregular?" James's voice had a dangerous edge. "Let me make one thing very clear. Lauren Miller deserves the same respect as anyone else here. Anyone who continues to spread rumors will face consequences." The door opened fully, revealing Lauren standing there, the crumpled letter in her hand. All eyes turned to her. "The meeting is over," James declared. The executives filed out, avoiding her gaze. "How long were you standing there?" James asked when they were alone. "Long enough," Lauren replied. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did," he said, noticing the paper in her hand. What is that?" "My resignation." James read it quickly and looked up, alarmed. "Why?" "The rumors, the looks. I can't stay here." "Lauren, don't let them push you away. It's not just about me, it's for Grace too, and for you." "Your reputation." "My reputation?" James stepped closer. "I don't care what they think, I only care about you and Grace." "James, be realistic. We're from different worlds." "They were different," he corrected, "until Grace called me Daddy and changed everything." James led Lauren to 2 chairs in a corner of the room. They sat facing each other, their knees almost touching. "Before I met you and Grace, my life was empty," he began, taking her hands. "I had money, power, professional respect, but I came home every night to a silent apartment." Lauren watched his face, so different from the cold businessman she had known. "In the past few weeks, I've discovered what's truly important," James continued. "Grace's laughter as she feeds the ducks, the way you maintain your dignity despite all the hardships, the feeling of belonging to something bigger than myself." He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "You don't have to work as a cleaner anymore. I see potential in you. I see an incredible woman. By my side, you can be whatever you want, but it's more than that." He paused, his intense eyes on hers. "I want you and Grace with me. I want to build a real family." Lauren felt the air leave her lungs. "James, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," he replied. "I've spent years building a company, accumulating wealth, and for what? To have no one to share it with." James wiped away a tear that was trickling down Lauren's cheek. "Until I met you two, I didn't know what I was missing." "People will talk," she whispered. "Let them talk. What matters is what we feel. And what do you feel?" "I'm in love with you, Lauren Miller." "I'm in love with you too," she admitted. "But I'm scared." "We can be scared together, like a family." Lauren thought of Grace, of how the girl's face lit up when James arrived, of how the 3 of them seemed complete together. "Yes," she finally said, smiling through her tears, "I want to try." James kissed her softly, a kiss that sealed a promise, the beginning of something new. When they parted, Lauren saw the resignation letter in his hands. "I don't think I'll be needing this anymore," she said, tearing the paper into pieces. "Grace is going to be so happy," she whispered. "Then we'll be 3 happy people," James replied. "A real family." Chapter 12. The circle is complete. The decision of where to live sparked long conversations. James's penthouse apartment was spacious and luxurious, with panoramic city views, valuable art and furniture signed by famous designers. Lauren and Grace's small apartment was cozy, with colorful walls and memories in every corner, but also with problematic plumbing, limited space, and a rent that had always strained Lauren's budget. Each place represented different worlds, one of material wealth, the other of emotional richness. "I want you to come live with me," James said one evening, as the 3 of them had dinner at Lauren's small kitchen table. "There's enough space for everyone, and you'd be more comfortable." Grace's eyes widened, her spoonful of mashed potatoes paused in mid-air. "Does your house have a pool?" "Lily has a pool in her building." James smiled. "It does. And a rooftop garden where we can plant flowers, maybe even strawberries." "Wow," Grace exclaimed. Then she frowned thoughtfully. "But what about my stars?" "What stars, sweetie?" James asked. "The ones Mommy painted on my ceiling. I can't sleep without them." Lauren touched James's arm. "They're glow-in-the-dark stars. I painted them when she was 4 and afraid to sleep alone." James looked at them both, understanding that this wasn't just a change of address, but of an entire life. His apartment, with all its luxury, had never truly been a home. It was more of a status symbol, a place to spend the nights between workdays. "What if we did things differently?" he suggested. "What if I changed my apartment to be more like yours? We'd keep what you love, just in a bigger space. And Grace could choose what she wants her new room to look like." The girl's eyes lit up. "Can I have a purple wall?" James laughed. "Purple, green, whatever you want." Lauren squeezed his hand across the table. "Are you sure? Your apartment is so elegant and completely lifeless," James completed. "I want a home, not a decoration magazine cover." And so, in the following weeks, James Winterfield's luxurious penthouse underwent the most surprising transformation the building had ever seen. The renowned interior designer, who had always handled his decor, nearly had a breakdown when James explained what he wanted. "Less minimalism, more color," James instructed. "I want it to look like a place where people actually live, not a museum exhibit." One of the guest suites was transformed into a child's room, with one purple wall and the others in a soft shade of yellow. On the ceiling, Lauren painted entire constellations that glowed in the dark, recreating the night sky from the old room, but in an expanded and even more beautiful version. James insisted that Lauren choose the new living room furniture, replacing the Italian leather sofas with more comfortable and inviting pieces. The minimalist chill rarely used kitchen came to life with colorful utensils, plants in the windows, and Grace's drawings fixed to the refrigerator with magnets. The formal dining room was replaced with a round wooden table where they could share meals without the formality that James had always hated, but never questioned. "You don't have to change everything for our sake," Lauren protested, watching workers remove valuable works of art to make room for framed family photos and Grace's drawings. "I'm not changing it out of obligation," James replied, hugging her by the waist as they watched the transformation. "I'm creating a home, our home. And I've discovered I never really had one until now." Moving day was chaotic and exciting. Grace ran from room to room, discovering spaces that seemed endless compared to the small apartment where she had always lived. Lauren, more restrained, organized the few things she had brought, trying to find her place in this new world. "Far some I left this wall empty," James said, showing her a space in the living room. "I thought you could put your favorite photos here, and maybe some new ones, of the three of us together." Lauren looked at the space, then at the man beside her. "You've really thought of everything, haven't you?" "I tried," he replied with a shy smile. "I want you to feel at home here. For this to be our place, not just mine where you're staying." Adjusting to the new life required changes from everyone. For James, accustomed to solitude and silence, the bustling mornings with Grace getting ready for school were a delightful challenge. The scattered toys, the breakfast conversations, the need to organize schedules around a child, it was all new and surprisingly fulfilling. "I never had breakfast at this table before you arrived," James confessed one morning, as he watched Lauren make pancakes and Grace set the table. "But I usually just had coffee in the kitchen, standing up here before leaving." "That's not breakfast," Grace protested, horrified. "Breakfast has to have pancakes, or cereal, or eggs." "And family," James completed, tapping the tip of her nose, making her laugh. For Lauren, used to doing everything on her own, it was strange to have someone to share responsibilities with. In the first few weeks, she insisted on preparing all the meals, cleaning every room, as if she needed to justify her presence there. "You don't have to prove anything," James said gently one morning, taking the vacuum cleaner from her hands. "You're not here as an employee, Lauren. You're here as my partner. My love." For Grace, having a man in the house, a quasi-father, was a novelty that filled her with questions and expectations. "Are you taking me to school today?" she would ask every morning, jumping on the bed where James and Lauren were still sleeping. "I can pick you up too," he would reply, pretending to hide under the pillow while the girl laughed. "And then we can stop for ice cream." "James, don't spoil her too much," Lauren would warn, trying to sound serious but failing in the face of their conspiratorial smiles. Lauren watched these interactions with a mix of joy and amazement. James, who commanded one of the largest companies in the country, now set aside his mornings to take Grace to school. The man who closed million-dollar deals now dedicated his evenings to reading children's stories, doing different voices for each character, creating alternate endings that made Grace giggle. As the weeks went by, they established routines that further united this unconventional family. Dinners together every night, without exception. James made a point of leaving the office on time, something he would never have considered before. Outings on Sundays, always starting at Riverside Park, where it all began. Movie nights at home on Fridays, complete with popcorn and blankets on the living room sofa. "Your phone hasn't rung today," Lauren commented one Sunday as they walked through the park, Grace running ahead to feed the ducks. "I turned it off," James replied simply. "I've discovered the world doesn't end if I'm unreachable for a few hours." He smiled, lacing his fingers through hers. "Some things are more important." On a rainy Saturday afternoon, the three of them were in the kitchen baking cookies. Grace, wearing an apron almost bigger than she was spreading flour everywhere while trying to roll out the dough. Lauren was patiently teaching her how to use the rolling pin, while James, equally covered in flour, was sorting the cookie cutters. "These are for you, Mommy," Grace said, pointing to the heart-shaped cookies. "And these," she continued, pointing to the star-shaped ones, "are for Dad." The sudden silence made Grace look up. James was staring at her with an expression that mixed surprise and deep emotion. "What's wrong?" Grace asked, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetie," Lauren said, her voice soft. "It's just that you called James Dad." Grace looked from one to the other, thoughtful. "But he is, isn't he? You said dads are people who take care of us, who love us, and are always there. That's what he does." James knelt in front of her, his eyes misty. "Sigh, Gracie, are you sure you want to call me that? It's a very special word." The girl nodded as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "I'm sure. On the inside, that's what you are." She touched his chest with her small, flour-dusted hand, leaving a white mark on his dark shirt. "Dad," James hugged her tightly, lifting her off the floor, not caring about the flour spreading all over his clothes. "Thank you," he whispered into her blonde hair. "It's the best thing anyone has ever called me." Lauren, leaning against the kitchen counter, watched the scene with tears in her eyes. The circle was complete. What had started as an innocent mistake, a child calling a stranger Daddy, had transformed into the purest truth. That night, after Grace had fallen asleep under the painted constellations on her ceiling, Lauren and James stood on the balcony, watching the city lights below, sharing a glass of wine and the comfortable silence of those who have finally found their place. "I never imagined we would have this," Lauren confessed, nestled in his arms. "A complete family." "I always had everything," James reflected, "and at the same time, I had nothing that truly mattered. Money, power, success, none of it filled the emptiness. And now I have everything that truly matters." He kissed the top of her head. "I have you." "And my family," Lauren smiled, snuggling closer to him. "Grace was right from the beginning, you know, that first day when she called you Daddy in the company lobby. Somehow, she saw what the rest of us couldn't see yet." "The wisdom of children," James agreed. "They see past appearances, straight to people's hearts." They stood in silence for a moment, just feeling each other's presence, the peace of finally belonging somewhere, to someone. "A family built not by chance," Lauren said softly, "but by the choice to love and to stay." "The best choice I ever made," James replied, kissing her under the city's starry sky. And so, in the penthouse apartment that had finally become a home, three people who were once incomplete and lonely found what they had always been searching for: the true love that turns strangers into family. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.